the new Assistant Secretary of State for International Narcotics Matters. He testified over the past 2 days before House and Senate subcommittees that administration officials aren't yet convinced Castro is committed to combating drug traffic. Let me begin, Secretary Levitsky, where Dave Marish left off. As you weigh the two dangers to the United States, which in this day and age really does seem greater, communism, as it is represented by Fidel Castro and his government, or the international drug trade?
Well, I don't think you can pose the question exactly that way and get a sensible answer. Narcotics and the evil that it does to our country are, of course, a very important subject for us in foreign policy. And what we are trying to do is stem that flow, and we're working with a number of countries around the world to do that, countries that either grow coca or produce cocaine or are transit points for cocaine coming into this country.
Well, Secretary Levitsky, I agree with you. I don't think that the question ought to be posed that way either. But the reason I posed it that way is that it seems to reflect U.S. government policy, that we are saying we can't really deal with Fidel Castro because of the danger that a communist regime in Cuba represents and because of political reasoning. I take your position, and that is why? What does the one have to do with the other? That's what I'm asking you.
Yeah. Well, let me put it this way. Our interest in drugs stands on its own. We're interested in working with every country in the world to try to stem this flow.
Including Cuba?
We have, including Cuba, if in fact Cuba were willing to cooperate as well. We have little evidence that Cuba is willing to cooperate. In fact, over the years, Congressman Rangel spoke of a stonewall. We have gotten a stonewall from the Cubans. We have brought information to Cuban attention. We have given them, for example, information out of indictments in this country back as far as 1982. And we have always had this dismissed by them on the basis that this was some kind of political attack. So
no.
We have to question the seriousness in that regard. Our policy is to watch their actions, not listen to their words. Let's see if their actions are the same as their words.
Congressman Rangel, you know that Fidel Castro is a past master at playing different melodies on different instruments. He may appear to be cooperative as all get out when he meets with Charlie Rangel, and at the same time be stonewalling the State Department. What do you think?
I think you're 100% correct, but I think when you're dealing with the Soviet Union and a billion Chinese, that you always take that risk. I have enough confidence in my government that we're able to separate the wheat from the chaff, and when someone like Castro is trying to con the State Department, the truth of the matter is that we actually freeze when it gets to Cuba. We're doing business with Cuba today in search and rescue and skyjacking, but it's only when it comes to improving the cooperation in the area of drugs that you find us freezing up.
What specifically, Congressman, did Mr. Castro tell you he was prepared to do? What have you passed on to the State Department, and what are you getting back?
First of all, I never would have gone to Cuba if I wasn't convinced by the Coast Guard and the Drug Enforcement Agency that it would make a tremendous improvement in interdiction of drugs coming into the United States and specifically into my congressional district if we could get the cooperation of the Cubans. When we went over there, we didn't know what to expect. We hardly even expected that they would offer to surrender 20 Americans that they already have arrested for drug trafficking that we don't want any part of. And I think there's untold information that these people may have as to who they were dealing with in the United States, besides the fact that just on humanitarian basis, these people have been left over there stranded, no visitors, can't speak Spanish, and I think we should look into it.
Let me stop you on that one for a minute. You're saying he offered to give you those 20 people back,
yes,
or is offering them the State Department won't take them?
That's right. He
Mr.
said...
Levitsky, let me just ask you about that. Do you happen to know about that? I realize that there are different departments over there at State, and this one may not be yours, but wouldn't you want to talk to these folks?
Must be in a different department than mine. I'm not aware of that.
Well, do you want to talk to them?
Well, if there is information that they have, certainly, that our law enforcement agencies could use, of course we'd want to talk with them.
Well,
we'd like to talk with the people that are indicted in this country as well, that are Cuban citizens, but we've been stonewalled by the Cubans on that as well.
But I mean, doesn't it seem reasonable to you that if these folks were arrested on drug charges in Cuba, they've got something to tell you about somebody, don't they?
Well, certainly they might have, and that's a judgment the law enforcement agencies would have to make, but I assume they would have some information, in fact, if they were arrested in Cuba.
All right, let's talk
the
about...
Drug Enforcement Administration says they can't deal with this because it's a State Department matter. And the State Department knows that we have American citizens in jail, that Castro said that, one, that he just doesn't believe it's fair to them that they're having increased mental pressure placed on them because they want to release them and turn them over to the United States.
Congressman, well, just 1 second, because we've got to take a break, but I just want to ask you on this one point. I don't quite understand. If there are Americans over there and Castro is willing to send them back, on what basis does the State Department tell you they're not willing to accept them? I don't know.
Well, they didn't tell that to me. They told it to the DEA. I went to the DEA and I told them, I said, you know, we went there. Some of the members wanted political prisoners. Certainly no one wanted to bring back drug traffickers. But as you pointed out, these people obviously were trafficking with American citizens. When Castro arrested the Cubans, the people from the Cuban interest section came to my office and told me that once again Castro's made an offer to cooperate. I thought, if only we could find out more about these people that were arrested and before they were executed, whether we could get information, because after all, they weren't bringing the cocaine to Cuba. They were bringing that cocaine into the United States.
Let me stop you right there, because I want to come back on that point to the Assistant Secretary in just a moment. We'll continue our conversation in a moment.
Duluth, where Minnesota relaxes. Duluth, where Minnesota gets away.
Where are Minnesotans turning for their 6 o'clock news?
Eyewitness News.
Channel 5 KSTP.
Minnesotans are turning to Eyewitness News at 6 because of stories and features they can't get anywhere else. Features like Crime Stoppers help the Twin Cities solve crime, and exclusive live reports from our News Star network take you anywhere in the world in a matter of seconds.
Now that's important to me.
All day, every day, Minnesotans are turning to Minnesota's news channel, Channel 5.
The man who made the Lindy a sensation left dancing for 30 years. Now Frankie Manning's back, a Tony-winning choreographer, with Bob Brown on 2020 Friday.
Tomorrow, all the latest news and weather, plus the newly knighted Sir Rex Harrison. And the real scoop on low-calorie ice cream on Good Morning America tomorrow.
Secretary Levitsky, talk to me for a moment about that extraordinary show trial in Havana a few weeks ago. And the fact that Fidel Castro ended up ordering or permitting a court to order the execution of some of his closest associates and friends.
Well, you're right, Ted. It was an extraordinary trial, and there's been a lot of speculation about what the reason for this was.
What's yours?
Well, it's not clear. We have had evidence on some of the people involved in that trial before, and we knew they were involved in drug trafficking. We never had any evidence on General Ochoa, which is the curious part of this.
As a matter of fact, do you agree with the point that Dave Marish made, or that was made in Dave Marish's piece, namely that one of the admirals sitting on the tribunal
Absolutely.
Was involved in the drug trade and boasted of drowning the United States in drugs?
That admiral that he referred to, in fact, has been indicted in the United States along with 3 others in 1982, and we have provided that information to the Cubans. He sat in judgment of General Ochoa and the others. Another person who was indicted in 1982 was the current Cuban ambassador to Nicaragua, who at that time was Cuban ambassador to Colombia. So the Cubans have this information. They have yet to show any indication that they want to deal with this seriously. But Ted, I want to make something clear, just so that it's understood. If Fidel Castro wants to enlist in the war on drugs, that's fine with us. In fact, Cuba is a gap in our system in the Caribbean to shut off the flow of drugs. What we are saying is that we want to test the Cuban intentions, but we won't test them by what they say. we will test them by what they do. And there are a lot of things that